Welcome to the Interest Facts YouTube channel. If you're someone who, loves to learn, loves to grow, always looking to sharpen your mind, then yeah, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something I think is incredibly crucial right now, the art of thinking. Specifically, how to make smarter decisions when we're just swimming in information. You've shared some really fascinating source material with us, and we're going to unpack it together. We'll pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising facts too. Our mission really is to give you a powerful cognitive toolkit. Think of it as a set of mental models to help you cut through the noise, find clarity, and really master decision-making.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting or maybe frustrating is how this sheer abundance of information, which you'd think would help us, can actually get in the way of clear thinking. So we'll definitely explore those cognitive challenges of living in this information age. But then the good part, we'll look at how mental models can be like your internal compass, guiding you to better understanding and, well, more effective choices.
It is a total paradox, isn't it? More knowledge available than ever, yet somehow harder to think straight. Our sources really dig into this. How does that contradiction actually manifest in our daily lives?
Yeah, that's the core of it. It really boils down to what everyone's talking about. Information overload. I mean, get this. Our sources say the average person, maybe in North America, consumes something like 34 gigabytes of data every single day.
34 gigs? That's hard to even picture. What does that translate to?
It's like reading or hearing about 100,000 words daily. It's way more than our brains are really built to handle efficiently.
Wow. Okay. I definitely feel that some days. And I imagine there are some real-world consequences, right? It's not just a feeling.
Oh, absolutely. The consequences are quite stark. There was a UK study, I think from 2022, that showed 80% of people linked their daily stress directly to information overload.
80%. That's huge.
It is. And that number was way up from just 44% only 2 years before that in 2020. So it's getting worse. And think about our work lives. Nearly a quarter of UK workers reported using 11 or more different digital platforms daily just to do their jobs.
11 platforms.
And maybe even more striking, 41% of UK employees spend an hour or more every day just searching for files, just trying to find the information they need.
An hour a day just searching. That's incredibly inefficient and probably super frustrating.
Exactly. It's not just lost time.
Yeah.
It hits mental well-being, boosts stress, Earth performance, and yeah, definitely impacts job satisfaction.
Okay, so the information overload is one massive piece of the puzzle, but our sources also mentioned something else that's kind of alarming. Our attention spans. What's going on there?
Right, that's the other side of the coin. The data shows the average human attention span has dropped. It went from about 12 seconds back in 2000 down to just 8 seconds by 2020 or 2021.
8 seconds? Seriously, isn't that...
Less than a goldfish.
Yeah.
A goldfish is apparently around 9 seconds.
Oh my goodness.
And this is really tied into what some call the attention economy. Digital platforms, especially social media, they often thrive on keeping our attention fragmented. Quick hits, sensational stuff, constant notifications, it all distracts. And the worry is it's actually eroding our ability to do deep reading or maintain focus on complex tasks for extended periods.
So let me get this straight. We're drowning in information and our ability to actually focus on any of it is shrinking. What happens when you put those two things together? What's the result?
Well, you hit on a crucial point. When you combine that overload with a shrinking attention span, you often get what's called the paralysis of choice.
Paralysis choice. Okay.
Yeah, and it shows up in a couple of ways. One is decision fatigue. Making choices, especially lots of them, it literally tires out your brain. So the quality of your decisions actually goes down over time.
Right, by the end of the day, you just can't make another decision.
Exactly. And then there's analysis paralysis. This is where you get so caught up in weighing all the options, overthinking every little detail, that you end up making no decision at all. You're just stuck, deadlocked. And it becomes this negative feedback loop. You feel anxious because you can't decide, which makes it even harder to think clearly, leading to more inefficiency and anxiety. It traps you.
Okay, this sounds pretty bleak. Information overload, shrinking attention, decision paralysis. So how do we fight back? How do we cut through this noise? What do our sources suggest is the antidote?
Right, it's not all doom and gloom. The sources point towards something really powerful as a solution, developing and using mental models.
Mental models. Okay, what exactly are those?
So think of a mental model as basically an internal map. Or maybe a simplified explanation you hold in your mind about how something in the real world works. It's like a mental shortcut for understanding complex things. And they're not something you're born with. You actually build them up over your lifetime through experiences, education, the culture you're in. But here's the key difference. Unlike cognitive biases, which often operate unconsciously, mental models are deliberate tools. You consciously choose to apply them to improve your thinking, and you can refine them, sort of debug them over time.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. Tool you choose versus like a mental glitch you have to watch out for. So how do these internal maps actually shape how we see things, these simulations of the world?
Well, they fundamentally influence what you believe is true, what possibilities you even consider, and how you connect different events. They really frame your reality. But, and this is important, we have to remember they are simplifications. They're not perfect replicas of reality. A classic example, the old intuitive belief that heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones. Galileo disproved that centuries ago, right? But it still feels counterintuitive to a lot of people because our default mental model might be flawed.
Right, the feather in the bowling ball.
Exactly. And this shows their power. If new information comes along that contradicts one of your deeply held mental models, you're actually more likely to dismiss the information than to update your model. It takes conscious effort.
Okay, so this cognitive toolkit sounds essential. Can you give us a taste? What kinds of mental models do our sources talk about?
Yeah, there's several types. One category is conceptual models. These are about giving you a high-level grasp of a system. Think of explaining a really complex process using a simple story or maybe even like a comic strip showing the steps. It simplifies the big picture.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Then you have causal models. These are all about cause and effect. How does A lead to B? They're super useful for things like predicting business outcomes or, in science, figuring out the root cause of something.
Got it. Cause and effect.
We also have mental imagery models. This is basically using visualization, picturing scenarios in your mind to help solve problems, boost creativity, or even just remember things better.
An athlete visualizing success.
Precisely. And another interesting one is analogical models. This is where you draw comparisons between different areas, like the example of a teenager learning to drive. They might unconsciously apply mental models from playing, say, a racing video game to driving a real car. It's not a perfect match, obviously, but it provides a starting point, an analogy.
Yeah, I can see how that might work, or maybe not work so well sometimes. Okay, any others?
And finally, there are domain-specific models. This is the specialized knowledge you build up in a particular field. So if you're in finance, understanding concepts like supply and demand or compound interest or opportunity cost, those are domain-specific models. They're the shortcuts experts use within their area.
Right, the expert level stuff. Okay, this is great. We understand the problem, the overload, the attention drain, and we know mental models are the tools. So let's get practical. Which specific models can really boost our decision-making? Let's start with first principles thinking.
Yes, first principles thinking. This one's really fundamental. It's all about questioning every assumption you hold about a problem, breaking it down relentlessly until you get to the absolute, most basic, irreducible truths. You're essentially building your understanding or solution from the ground up, not just borrowing ideas or reasoning by analogy.
Building from the ground up. Okay.
Its roots go way back. Aristotle talked about first principles as the first basis for which a thing is known. Think of Euclid's geometry built entirely on just 5 basic postulates. Or René Descartes, his famous "I think, therefore I am," was his attempt to find an absolutely certain first principle through doubt.
And the modern example everyone points to is Elon Musk, right? He talks about this a lot.
Exactly. Musk calls it thinking like a physicist. You boil things down to their fundamental parts. Take SpaceX. The established cost for rockets was, say, $65 million. Musk didn't just accept that. He asked, okay, fundamentally, what is a rocket made of?
Right. What are the actual materials?
Yeah. He broke it down. Aluminum, titanium, copper, carbon fiber. And he found that the actual cost of the raw materials was only about 2% of the typical selling price.
Wow, only 2%.
That insight was key. It showed him it was possible to build rockets much cheaper, leading him to build in-house, focus on reusability, basically disrupting the entire industry by going back to first principles. He did something similar with Tesla and battery costs, questioning the historical price by looking at the raw material costs.
That's a fantastic example of challenging the status quo by digging deeper. So how can we, regular folks, apply first principles thinking in our own lives? It sounds like something for rocket scientists.
Not at all. It's really a way of thinking. Imagine you're feeling overwhelmed by email, for example. Instead of just saying, I need to check email less, First Principles pushes you to ask, okay, what is email really? What's its fundamental purpose for me? Is it just communication? Is it record keeping? Task management?
Okay, breaking down email itself.
Exactly. Why do I feel overwhelmed? Is it the volume, the expectations for replies? Could some of this be handled differently? By breaking it down, you might realize the root problem isn't email per se, but maybe unclear communication norms or using it for tasks better suited to another tool. You get to the core issue.
That makes perfect sense. Moving from the symptom feeling overwhelmed to the actual root cause. Our sources kind of break this down into steps, right?
Basically a 4-step process. First, identify and question your current assumptions about the problem. Second, break the problem down into its fundamental principles, the basic truths. Third, maybe reevaluate those principles in the current context. And fourth, build your solution up from those foundational truths.
And techniques like Socratic questioning just keep asking why.
Absolutely. Asking, why do I believe this? Or using the 5 whys technique where you just keep asking why about a problem that helps you drill down past the surface symptoms to the real root cause.
It seems useful for creativity too.
Definitely. It encourages you to challenge norms. Like a chef who understands the basic chemistry of ingredients can invent totally new dishes, not just follow recipes. Or Gutenberg combining existing tech foals, the coin punch and the wine press in a novel way based on fundamental principles to create the printing press.
So applying it to, say, personal finance.
Instead of just following generic advice, understand the first principles. Spend less than you earn, minimize debt, save regularly, invest wisely based on risk and return. When buying a car, don't just look at the monthly payment that's an analogy. Look at the total cost, the fundamental price, plus interest, insurance, maintenance.
Or even career changes.
Yeah, really questioning assumptions about what success looks like for you, what truly motivates you, building a path based on your core values, not just what society expects or what you've done before.
Okay, so First Principles helps us break things down to the core. But once we've done that and made a decision, we need to think about the consequences, right? That leads us to the next model. Second order thinking.
Exactly. First Principles gets you to a solid foundation for a decision. Second order thinking is about looking ahead and anticipating the result of that decision, not just the immediate ones, but the ripple effects, the consequences of the consequences.
Why it's X. Okay.
It requires you to constantly ask, okay, if I do this, what happens next? And then what? And then what? First order thinking is often impulsive, focused only on the immediate result. Second order thinking is more strategic, considering the longer-term indirect outcomes.
Can you give an example?
There's a really stark historical example from China in the 1960s, the Four Pests campaign. Mao Zedong ordered sparrows to be killed because they ate grain.
Right, trying to save crops.
That was the first order thinking. Kill sparrows, save grain. The immediate effect, fewer sparrows. But the second order effect was catastrophic. Sparrows also ate locusts and other insects. Without the sparrows, the insect populations exploded, leading to widespread crop failure and, tragically, a massive famine.
Wow, that's a brutal lesson in unintended consequences.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you see the need for second-order thinking everywhere today. In business, maybe implementing new technology automates a task that's first order. But the second-order effects might be needing employee retraining, facing new cybersecurity threats, or shifts in team morale.
Or like building a new highway to ease traffic.
Right. First order.
Yeah.
Less traffic, initially. Second order. It might encourage more people to live further out. Urban sprawl, increasing car dependency, and eventually leading to even worse traffic down the line. Plus environmental impacts, community changes. You have to think layers deep.
So it's about looking beyond the obvious, immediate impact.
Precisely. Investor Howard Marks talks about this a lot. He contrasts first-level thinking, which is simplistic, like, hey, that's a good company, I should buy the stock, with second-level thinking. Second-level thinking is deeper. Okay, it's a good company, but everyone knows it's a good company, so the price is probably already too high. Maybe I should sell. It's about considering what other people are thinking and what happens next. Playing chess, not checkers.
Makes sense. Okay, so we break things down with first principles, we anticipate ripples with second order. What about when things are just uncertain? When we don't know exactly what will happen? That brings us to probabilistic thinking.
Yes, probabilistic thinking. This is crucial because, let's face it, the world is full of uncertainty. This model is about embracing that uncertainty, but in a structured way. It means trying to identify all the possible outcomes of a situation, estimating the likelihood or probability of each one happening, and then using that analysis to choose the most advantageous path. It's about quantifying unpredictability as much as possible.
So not pretending we know the future, but trying to understand the odds.
Exactly. Its formal study actually goes back to the 17th century, with mathematicians like Pascal and Fermat tackling problems related to, well, gambling. Games of chance force people to think about probabilities. More recently, think about the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, described in Thinking, Fast and Slow. They showed how our intuitive thinking, our System 1, often uses shortcuts that aren't great at judging probabilities, leading to biases. Our System 2, the slower, more logical thinking, is better suited for this but takes effort. They also highlighted things like loss aversion, which ties into probability too.
How does this apply in different fields, like finance?
Well, someone like Warren Buffett explicitly uses it. He talks about weighing the probability of loss times the amount of possible loss against the probability of gain times the amount of possible gain. It's a very calculated way of assessing risk versus reward, moving beyond just gut feelings.
And in medicine, doctors must deal with uncertainty all the time.
Constantly. Good clinicians know they rarely have absolute certainty. They have to think in terms of probabilities. What's the most likely diagnosis given these symptoms? What's the probability this treatment will work versus the probability of side effects? Using numbers, even estimates, makes decision-making more robust than just using vague terms like likely or unlikely.
Even in sports.
Absolutely. Athletes are constantly making split-second probabilistic calculations, even if they don't call it that. Should I take this shot? What's the probability goes in versus the probability of turning the ball over if I pass? And statisticians like Nate Silver emphasize this. He points out that uncertainty generally increases the further out you try to predict. He warns against relying on single-point forecasts without acknowledging the range of possibilities, the margin of error. Thinking probabilistically helps us avoid that false sense of certainty.
Okay, so we need to think about chances and likelihoods. Now, for a different angle, our sources talk about inversion, flipping problems on their head. How does that work?
Inversion is a really powerful, sometimes counterintuitive technique. Instead of asking, how do I achieve success or how do I get what I want, you flip it. You ask, how could I guarantee failure? Or what should I avoid doing?
Avoid failure instead of seeking success. Interesting.
Yeah. Its roots can be traced back to ancient Stoicism. They practiced something called premeditatio malorum, basically. Meditating on potential bad outcomes, imagining worst-case scenarios. Not to be morbid, but to reduce fear and anxiety about them, and to prepare contingency plans. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime partner, is famous for saying, invert, always invert. He argued that a lot of their success at Berkshire Hathaway came not from trying to be brilliant, but from consistently trying not to be stupid.
Consistently not stupid. I like that.
By identifying all the ways they could fail, taking on too much debt, damaging their reputation, investing in businesses they didn't understand, and then actively avoiding those things, they found a more reliable path to long-term success.
So how can we use inversion practically?
Let's say you want to improve teamwork in your group. Instead of brainstorming ways to boost collaboration, try inverting. What could we do to actively prevent collaboration? How could we guarantee everyone works in silos?
Okay. So maybe like unclear goals, no communication channels, rewarding individual work over team success.
Exactly. By listing all the ways to fail at collaboration, you suddenly see clearly all the things you need to avoid or fix. It highlights the potential pitfalls.
Or maybe for a business, how could we drive away customers as quickly as possible?
Perfect. That would highlight terrible customer service, poor product quality, deceptive pricing, everything you absolutely should not do. Another practical application is the pre-mortem. Before starting a big project, the team gets together and imagines, okay, it's 6 months from now and this project has totally failed. Why did it fail? Discussing the potential failure points up front helps you anticipate and mitigate them.
That sounds incredibly useful, like a post-mortem but done before you mess up.
Precisely. It helps overcome optimism bias. And for personal productivity, you can ask, what can I do today to absolutely guarantee I get nothing done? That instantly highlights distractions, phone notifications, trying to multitask, unclear priorities that you need to eliminate. It also forces you to consider evidence that goes against your preferred plan.
Okay, that's 4 powerful models. First principles, second order, probabilistic, and inversion. The last one our sources highlight is systems thinking, seeing the bigger picture.
Yes, systems thinking. This is about shifting your perspective from looking at individual parts or isolated events to seeing the interconnected whole. understanding that things exist within complex systems, defined by relationships, feedback loops, and often emergent behaviors that you wouldn't predict just by looking at the parts.
Interconnected whole feedback loops. Okay, break that down a bit.
Donella Meadows, who was a real pioneer in this field, described a system simply as having elements, the parts, interconnections, how the parts relate, and a purpose or function. And she noted that often the purpose of the system is the most crucial aspect, but also sometimes the least obvious. Key concepts include things like stocks. These are measurable quantities within the system, like the amount of water in a bathtub or money in a bank account. And flows, the rates at which these stocks change, like the water flowing in or out, or deposits and withdrawals.
Okay, stocks and flows. What about feedback loops?
Feedback loops are critical. They happen when a change in a stock affects the flows coming into or out of that same stock. There are two main types. Balancing loops work to keep a system stable around a certain point. Think of a thermostat in your house. If the temperature stock drops, the furnace inflow turns on to bring it back up. If it gets too high, the AC might kick in. It maintains equilibrium.
Got it, like keeping things steady.
Then there are reinforcing loops. These amplify change, leading to exponential growth or decline. Think of compound interest. The more money you have stock, the more interest inflow you earn, which adds to the stock, leading to even more interest. Or on the negative side, stress leading to unhealthy eating, which causes more stress, which leads to more unhealthy eating. It spirals.
That makes sense. These systems sound like they're everywhere.
They absolutely are. The human body is a classic example. Organs, cells, hormones, all interconnected, working together. Soccer team, players, rules, the ball, the shared goal of winning. It's a dynamic system. A university, the global economy. These are all complex systems with countless interconnections and feedback loops.
So what's the benefit of thinking this way? How does it help decision-making?
A major benefit is identifying leverage points. These are places within a complex system where a small change, a small intervention, can actually create a really big positive impact overall. Instead of just treating symptoms, systems thinking helps you find those high-impact spots. For example, root cause analysis. Maybe using those 5 whys again is really an application of systems thinking. You're trying to find the deep driver of the problem within the system, not just patch up the immediate issue. Addressing the root cause gives you leverage for lasting improvement.
Okay, these 5 mental models, first principles, second order, probabilistic, inversion, systems thinking, that's a seriously powerful toolkit. But even with these tools, our thinking isn't perfect, right? Our sources talk about cognitive biases.
That's right. Even when we try to be rational and use these models, our brains have these built-in shortcuts, these systematic patterns of deviating from pure logic. These are cognitive biases.
And the key difference, again, is that models are tools we choose. Biases are more like default settings we need to be aware of.
Exactly. Models are conscious strategies. Biases are often unconscious tendencies that can distort how we perceive information and make judgments. Recognizing them is the first step to counteracting their influence.
Okay, let's hit a few key ones. First up, confirmation bias, the echo chamber in our heads.
Precisely. Confirmation bias is our natural tendency to actively seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe. And at the same time, we tend to ignore, dismiss, or downplay evidence that contradicts our existing beliefs.
So we basically look for proof that we're right.
Pretty much. It feels good to be right. This leads to things like selective exposure, only reading news sources or following people online who agree with you.
And social media algorithms can make this worse, can't they?
Oh, definitely. By design, they often feed you more of what you've already liked or engaged with. This creates those infamous echo chambers or filter bubbles where your existing views just get reinforced over and over and you're rarely exposed to differing perspectives. This is a big factor in societal polarization and, unfortunately, helps misinformation spread.
Scary stuff. Okay, next bias. Anchoring bias. The power of the first number.
Yes, anchoring. This is where the very first piece of information you receive about something, even if it's totally arbitrary or irrelevant, tends to disproportionately influence all your subsequent judgments and decisions about it. You get anchored to that initial value.
And we don't adjust enough from that anchor.
Exactly. We tend to make insufficient adjustments away from that starting point. Think about shopping. You see a ridiculously priced handbag for, say, $1,000. Then you see a similar one for $300. Suddenly, the $300 one seems like a bargain, right? Even if $300 is still objectively expensive, it's anchored against the $1,000.
Ah, I see. Or like in negotiations.
Definitely. The first offer made, whether it's for a salary or the price of a car, often sets the anchor for the whole negotiation. Car dealers famously try to anchor you to the low monthly payment, distracting you from the much larger total cost of the vehicle.
Right. Classic sales tactic. Okay, one more big one. Loss aversion. The idea that losing hurts more than winning feels good.
That's the gist of it. Psychologically, the pain we feel from a loss is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure we feel from equivalent gain. Losing $100 feels much worse than finding $100 feels good.
Twice as powerful. Wow.
Yeah, it's a fundamental asymmetry in how we process gains and losses. And it makes us, generally speaking, more motivated to avoid losses than we are to achieve gains. We tend to stick with what we have, the status quo, rather than risk losing it for a potential gain.
And this leads to things like being overly cautious or the sunk cost fallacy.
Absolutely. Loss aversion contributes heavily to risk-averse behavior. And it fuels the sunk cost fallacy, that tendency to keep investing time, money, or effort into something that's clearly failing, just because you've already put resources in. You don't want to lose your initial investment, even though logically it's already gone and shouldn't influence future decisions.
You see this in investing all the time, right? People holding on to losing stocks, hoping they'll come back.
Classic example. They don't want to realize the loss. You also see it in health decisions. Sometimes people hesitate about a vaccine because they focus disproportionately on the small probability of side effects, a potential loss, compared to the much larger probability of protection, a potential gain. And marketers definitely use it. Think about free trials. Once you have something, you don't want to lose it. Or fear of missing out, FOMO, that's playing on loss aversion. Loyalty programs, too, they leverage our fear of losing accumulated points or status.
Man, these biases are powerful. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. We've really taken a deep dive into the art of thinking. We saw how the modern world, the information age, throws up some serious challenges. Information overload, shrinking attention spans, leading to decision fatigue and paralysis. But the good news is we've also armed you, hopefully, with some incredible tools. Those powerful mental models like first principles thinking, second order thinking, probabilistic thinking, inversion, and systems thinking.
Yeah, and these aren't just, abstract ideas for academics. They are truly actionable frameworks, ways you can actively structure your thinking to gain clarity and make much more effective choices in your own life. And just as importantly, we've shown a light on some of those common cognitive traps: confirmation bias, anchoring, loss aversion. Just knowing they exist, being able to spot them in yourself and others, that's a huge step toward counteracting them. It helps you move from just reacting to actually proactively shaping how you think.
Absolutely. So for you, the listener, the person who loves to learn and improve, remember, this isn't like a one and done thing. Thinking better is a continuous journey. Based on everything we've discussed, our sources really recommend a few key practices to make smarter, more resilient decisions going forward. First,
cultivate deliberate thinking. Make a conscious effort, especially for important decisions, to slow down and engage that more logical, effortful System 2 thinking, rather than just relying on your gut instinct or System 1.
Right. Second, actively build your mental model toolkit. Don't just learn about these models, practice using them. Apply first principles to a problem you're facing. Ask, and then what, for second order. Think about probabilities. Try inverting a goal. Look for the systems at play. The more you use them, the more second nature they become.
Third, develop bias awareness. Actively look for information that challenges your existing beliefs. Fight that confirmation bias. When you encounter a number or price, consciously set your own anchor before reacting to theirs. And try reframing decisions. Focus on the potential gains, not just avoiding losses.
Good ones. Also, prioritize information management. Be intentional about filtering the noise. Find strategies to reduce the feeling of overload. Your attention is incredibly valuable. Protect it.
Then finally, maybe most importantly, foster continuous learning. Keep exploring. Read about cognitive science, psychology, decision-making. Stay curious. Your mind is your greatest asset. Keep sharpening it.
Love it. It's all about empowering you to make choices that are more informed, more effective, and ultimately more robust.
Which should lead to, greater success, better adaptability, and honestly, just improved overall well-being in all parts of your life.
So after all that, what stands out most to you from this deep dive? Is there one mental model or maybe a bias that really resonated? How might you start applying some of this in your own life, maybe even this week? We would genuinely love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let us know what you think. And hey, if you found this deep dive valuable, if you learned something useful, please do us a huge favor. Hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And of course, subscribe to Interest Facts for more deep dives like this one. Oh, and share this video with someone else you know who's always curious and loves to learn. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you in the next one.